Welcome to HUD's overview of the FY2012 funding and HEARTH update. My name is Ann Oliva. I am the Director of the Office of Special Needs Assistance Programs. Today I have with me Jonathan Harwitz, who is our Deputy Chief of Staff, and Brett Gagnon, who is a staff member that's been primarily responsible for ensuring that our HEARTH Act regulations are consistent across the board. The purpose of today's discussion is to discuss HUD's overall plan on preventing and ending homelessness, and to provide information and context about all of the resources we have available and are using to prevent and end homelessness within the department. This presentation was delivered at the 2012 National Alliance to End Homelessness Conference last week. We're also taping this presentation so that all of our stakeholders and grantees have access to the information we provided at that conference. Let's take a moment to talk about what we're going to touch on today. First, we're going to provide you with an update on the status of the HEARTH Act regulations. We're going to talk about achieving the goals of Opening Doors, the federal strategic plan to prevent and end homelessness. We're going to provide you information on the FY2012 and 2013 budgets and the implications for those budgets. We're going to talk about targeting HUD's affordable housing programs, as well as the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act regulations. And then we're going to have a discussion about systems change. Again, today's presentation, even though it is a series of slides that we're presenting to you, we are going to treat it like a conversation because all three of us here have different kinds of information and perspectives that we'd like to share with you in the same manner that we did at the National Alliance Conference. So first up, let's give all of you a status on the regulations. As you all know, the HEARTH Act passed in May 2009, and the Department of Housing and Urban Development has been working for nearly 3 years to develop the 6 sets of implementing regulations for the HEARTH Act. Of course, it would have been ideal to release all of these regulations at the same time, but that did not end up being a realistic option for us. So let me walk through the status of the regulations as of today. We have one published final rule, and that is the definition of homelessness. We also have 2 interim rules, the Emergency Solutions Grants programs with the conforming amendments to the Consolidated Plan, as well as the Continuum of Care program. We have one rule that has been proposed but is not in effect. That is the Homeless Management Information Systems rule. And we have one rule that is pending publication, that is the Rural Housing Stability Assistance Program rule. I think it's important for you all to know that HUD took a lot of time and effort to make sure that these rules really can work together at the local level. In both the ESG program and the Continuum of Care program, you will notice as you read these rules that we used the same language. For components, we also aligned on costs. We also took quite a bit of effort to align the program rules with the U.S. Interagency Council Federal Strategic Plan, because we all know that these programs, as important as they are, by themselves will not prevent and end homelessness across the country. So before we move on, I want to talk a little bit about Opening Doors, the federal strategic plan to prevent and end homelessness. As you all might remember, Opening Doors includes 4 major goals and many strategies that should be reviewed and developed at the local level. The 4 major goals in the FSP are to end chronic homelessness by 2015, to end veterans homelessness by 2015, to end family and youth homelessness by 2020, and to set a path to ending all homelessness. The Interagency Council tracks progress on these goals by using HUD's annual point-in-time data. I also think it's important for folks who are out there to know that at HUD, we developed very specific housing targets related to these goals that we track internally in 3 different areas. Targets for rapid rehousing, permanent supportive housing, and affordable housing. These targets inform our budgeting and planning processes. The Federal Strategic Plan is also the policy driver for our NOFA. So you will see in the NOFA what we choose to spend our money on is reflective of the goals of the Federal Strategic Plan. But the underlying assumption for the federal strategic plan, and in order for us to meet the goals of the federal strategic plan, really assumes that we are placing people into the right housing and services in order to meet their needs. The regulations, the new regulations, provide some tools for us to move forward to reach those goals, which we're going to talk about in some depth later. The other criteria that we really need to consider as we're moving forward, and one of the reasons that we need to continue to act as efficiently and as effectively as possible, is because we are facing some very tough budget environments as we move forward. And now I'm going to turn it over to Jonathan Harwitz to talk about the budget for FY12 and FY13.
Great, thanks, Ann. I just want to briefly touch base on our fiscal year 2012 budget proposal, our targeted homeless programs. Our budget submission is one of the strongest policy statements we make as an agency. And in fiscal year 2012, we reflected the commitment to achieving the goals of opening doors as well as implementing HEARTH, requesting over $2.3 billion in order to implement HEARTH. Just to put that in context, full HEARTH implementation would cost over $4 billion. Therefore, our request was a reasonable amount to implement most aspects of HEARTH. And in particular, we were wanting to continue the great work of HPRP and the Recovery Act through the Emergency Solutions Grants program, to implement HMIS and the now codified Continuum of care. So we submitted this budget at nearly $2.4 billion. Unfortunately, Congress, given the tight fiscal context, scaled back the request further, and we're currently making some very difficult decisions about what aspects of HEARTH we will be able to implement with these limited resources. With respect to the fiscal year 2013 budget, again, focusing on the targeted homeless programs, our budget request is committed to meeting the goals of opening doors. And specifically in 2013, we plan to tailor our specific existing programs to achieve the goals that Ann mentioned and our internal benchmarks. We're going to continue to implement innovative strategies for engaging homeless households, families, and individuals. And finally, expect that homeless individuals and families will utilize mainstream resources and benefits more often than has historically been the case. Because as Ann said, there is just no way that we are going to achieve the goals of the federal strategic plan simply through our targeted homeless programs. So just to talk about numbers here for a moment, we are looking at a request of $2.23 billion for HUD's homeless assistance grants, nearly $2 billion for the Continuum of Care program, $286 million for the ESG program, and $5 million to implement the Rural Housing Stability Assistance Program. Should also note that we have proposed $75 million for an additional 10,000 HUD VASH vouchers focused on ending veterans' homelessness by 2015.
And I would just note that $286 million for the ESG program is the same funding as we actually released in the 2012 allocation.
So just to really provide some stark illustration of the fiscal context that we're operating in, I wanted to share with everybody, as we did last week at the Alliance Conference, the language that was included in the accompanying report, the conference report to the House Appropriations Subcommittee on HUD in their version of the fiscal year 2013 budget. And they note, I'm not going to read this, you can look at the full quote, but basically the import of this is that the expectation that renewals will be automatic is not something that, at least on the House side, the Appropriations Committee is assuming going forward. And they note that this is not an entitlement program for existing programs. that the goal of these funds is to assist and house the homeless as effectively and efficiently as possible. And as we've noted, the HEARTH Act really offers an opportunity for us to do that. But this is really an indication that folks locally are going to have to continue the real paradigm shift that's been taking place over the past number of years, because we're simply not in a fiscal environment that will allow us to do anything but work as effectively and efficiently as possible. Before we move on, I wanted to talk about something else that we're focusing on here at HUD, which is to look at our mainstream affordable housing resources to ensure that they're doing as much as we can to serve homeless households and help us achieve the goals of the federal strategic plan. There are other community planning development programs, other CPD programs, and that includes HOME, CDBG, and HOPWA. I would just note in particular that with respect to HOME, there's data showing what a significant role that's played in gap financing for permanent supportive housing. CDBG is a critical resource for emergency shelters, and HOPWA is an excellent resource for homeless prevention, particularly for those households who would otherwise be extraordinarily costly in the healthcare system. Another area that we're really focusing on and emphasizing more clearly than perhaps HUD has in the past is focusing on HUD multifamily housing. That includes housing for the elderly and disabled 202 and 811 programs respectively, and project-based rental assistance. And we're looking at increasing targeting of those resources to the homeless. Finally, with respect to HUD's affordable housing resources, we have our public and Indian housing programs, including the Housing Choice Voucher Program and the Public Housing Program, and we're looking at innovative tools there for serving homeless households, and those include mechanisms, project basing and sponsor basing vouchers that have proven to be excellent innovative strategies for serving homeless individuals and families, and we're looking at expanding the use of those. And finally, I want to note, as Ann did, that we can't do this alone at HUD, and working in concert with the Interagency Council on Homelessness, we're working with other agencies to collaborate to achieve the goals of the federal strategic plan. And I would note a couple here. One is the HUD VASH program previously mentioned. We've worked very closely with the Department of Veterans Affairs to work through some initial glitches in getting these vouchers out. In fact, in fiscal year 2011, things were going so slowly that the administration wasn't comfortable requesting additional funding for HUD VASH vouchers, but by the time the appropriations bill was being considered, we had worked through so many of those that we were able to support provision of additional vouchers, and we received funding for HUD VASH in both 2011 and 2012, and requested, as I noted, funding in 2013. There are also two other things I would note. There's a Veterans Homelessness Prevention demonstration currently going on, building on the lessons of HPRP. And finally, we share a joint goal to end veterans homelessness by 2015 with the VA. We're also working closely with the Department of Health and Human Services and the Department of Education, particularly on youth homelessness, which is emerging and pressing issue, and want to note that our Continuum of Care guidance in fiscal year 2013 will include guidance on a youth point-in-time count for the first time, and that the Department of Health and Human Services is going to be integrating for the first time HMIS into their internal RIMA system so that we can improve data and reporting on youth homelessness. So now I'm going to turn this over to Brett to talk about the specific regulations.
Thanks, Jonathan. For fiscal year 2012, there are really two sets of regulations that will be guiding the targeted homeless assistance funding, and that's the Emergency Solutions Grants Program and the Continuum of Care Program. And what we're going to do is spend the next few slides talking about how these programs were intentionally designed to allow and require recipients of ESG funds and recipients of Continuum of Care funds and the Continuum of Care itself to coordinate planning and service delivery across the Continuum of Care's geographic area. Before we do that, though, I want to remind folk of the guiding values that we introduced back in the September conferences in Atlanta and Denver. Some of you hopefully were able to attend those, but for those of you who weren't, let's just remind you that we iterated there that our guidelines for developing these regulations were we were going to best serve people who are homeless. We were going to ensure that there was comprehensive local collaboration, coordination, and decision making, and that there was data collection and performance measures to help us measure what we are doing in the community and to help us ensure that we are effectively and efficiently serving homeless people across the country. Best serving people who are homeless, this is really the primary mission of these programs. It's the overarching goal of the Act. You're going to see it throughout the program regulations. You're going to see it in the upcoming Rural Housing Stability Assistance Program regulation. But let's talk through the rules that we've published thus far. The COC and the ESG regulations provide communities with the flexibility to determine what this means for them. That means that you all can look at what is available in your community, the type of homeless populations that you have in your community, the political will that you have in your community, and really determine what works for you. But along those lines, continuums of care have the responsibility to evaluate system-wide, not at a project level, but system-wide, the performance of ESG and COC recipients to really ensure that the process that you've implemented is best meeting the needs of those people who are homeless in your community. And if it's not, then the Continuum of Care and the ESG regulations provide you with the flexibility to change that. But really, we want to highlight that all of this should be driven by the data and the information that you're getting in your community.
And if I could just make a couple of quick points on this. I think, first of all, the goal of the HEARTH Act, which I was privileged enough to work on when I was working on Capitol Hill, was really to change the game, to think systemically. And as you've noted, continuums of care really are going to have to, for the first time, really evaluate their homeless and housing services system on a systemic level. And I think that's really critical because that's the only way we're really going to move the needle as opposed to a project-by-project basis. And the second point I would just make is that in terms of effectively serving homeless persons, I bring up the notion of dosage, that basically we need to get right the exact interventions that different populations need, and it's simply not possible in our current fiscal environment to be offering a richer, more expensive intervention that might be helpful to somebody but isn't precisely what's needed to most efficiently end homelessness for the greatest number of people. So I just want to note that that's something that really isn't going to be possible, and it's going to require people to make some difficult choices.
And I think that the other part of the HEARTH Act that's really important for people to remember and to pay attention to is, of course, we're going to do our best to serve people who are homeless. And we're going to be providing, through the HEARTH Act implementation, new tools to do that, but it also provides COCs with new authority in also to be able to implement those changes locally that they've never had before.
It's also one of the reasons we've been pushing you all to develop your HMISs through the NOFA over the past several years, because your HMIS data is going to be critical to looking to the system-wide level performance measures. And really, to get at all of this, there needs to be comprehensive local collaboration, coordination, and decision-making. The Continuum of Care and its recipients and the ESG recipients can't work apart any longer. If this is happening in your community, this is absolutely something that has to change. ESG recipients, Continuum of Care recipients, other affordable housing providers and service providers in the community all need to be coming together and looking at the resources that they have, collaborating and figuring out what is available for the different populations. The COC and the ESG rules require this. It requires that ESG recipients and COC program recipients work together to figure out how funds are going to be distributed. They work together to develop written standards for evaluating and serving homeless people. It's really important that when someone comes into any door within the continuum of care, when a homeless person comes into any door, that they're evaluated in the same way that they would be in any project across the continuum. It can't just be this person's presenting and I have a bed. Is this person appropriate for here? And if not, where is another place in the continuum that's the best fit for them? And to help with this, COCs and ESG recipients are going to be required to implement a centralized or coordinated assessment system, and all recipients of COC and ESG funds are going to be required to use that coordinated assessment system. And together, ESG and COC recipients must create performance standards and evaluate projects against these standards. I think it's important when you all are creating these standards to consider the different subpopulations and ensure that the performance standards accurately reflect the needs of those subpopulations and the realistic outcomes for those subpopulations. A goal for youth, for instance, might not be the same goal that's appropriate for someone who's chronically homeless. And we want to give you the flexibility, but also work together to figure out what works in your community to measure these at that nuanced level.
I think that just to add to that as well, especially on the issue of working with people who are chronically homeless and families that are chronically homeless, we know that they are often folks who have high needs and might be difficult to serve. So we don't want you to create performance standards that make it impossible for the programs who are really designed to serve those folks to not be able to meet the standards. So they need to, as Brett mentioned, they need to really be reflective of the population that particular program is designed to assist.
And this is another reason, as Ann mentioned earlier, that the regulations were really designed to have the same components where we could, to have the same requirements within components where we could, so that as you all are operating them on the local level, it's easier for you all to implement them. And we'll be coming out with future guidance to help you understand exactly where there are differences, but where we could, we kept it the same to help you all be able to do this better at the local level, or more easily.
I could just add briefly, I just want to add my own support to the notion that implementing a centralized or coordinated assessment system is absolutely critical to thinking systemically and at scale, as I mentioned earlier. There's really no way to do that if you have an incoherent or even somewhat haphazard way of assessing what the needs are of a given homeless individual or family. So it's almost impossible to, I think, locally overinvest in a really seamless central or coordinated assessment system.
And the way you're really going to measure all of this is through your data collection. Use of HMIS is required for all recipients of Continuum of Care and ESG funds. The only exception to this is victim service providers, and they must use a comparable database. Legal service providers can also use a comparable database, but they are not required to, and this would be to protect attorney-client privilege. HUD uses this data to understand the nature and extent of homelessness throughout the country. We use it to report to Congress, and we use it to make funding decisions. You will see through the performance measures in the HEARTH Act that continuums of care are required to report to HUD using their HMIS data, the systemic level performance. You're looking at the mean length of homelessness across all of your programs, not just at the individual program levels, your recidivism rates, things like that. But really, it's most important that you all use that data locally. You should be, continuums of care, and this is one of those increased responsibilities and increased power of the continuum of care. You all are now able to monitor recipient and subrecipient performance. You should be looking at the performance across all of your programs, setting local goals that make sense, and then ensuring that your local projects are meeting those goals, and if not, figuring out a way to help them meet those goals. And so here's where we start to talk about the continuum of care and its increased responsibility. The continuum of care it is just the representatives from relevant organizations within the geographic area. This includes nonprofit providers, victim service providers, public and private entities. We used to use it to refer to the plan, to the geography, to all of those things, but now it's just the group of representatives. And this wide group of representatives should come together to carry out these responsibilities, to operate the continuum of care, to designate and operate the HMIS. I think this is really important. We've been sending signals through the NOFA for years that the continuum of care is in charge of the HMIS, and this regulation makes it clear that the continuum of care is responsible for designating the HMIS, for choosing the HMIS lead, for ensuring that everybody within the continuum uses the HMIS. This doesn't mean that they can't assign another agency to be responsible for that, but they are the ones with the power to designate and operate the HMIS. They're also responsible for developing the housing and service plan for the continuum of care, and this should include everything from street outreach, emergency shelter, all the way to homelessness prevention, and should take into account all of the resources within your community, emergency solutions grants, continuum of care, other mainstream services. And then it's the responsibility of the continuum of care to prepare an application and submit an application for continuum of care funds.
So I would just note for those of you that might be watching this series of broadcasts for the first time that now that the continuum of care regulation is available for you to read, there is a fairly significant portion of it that is dedicated to talking about the requirements for the continuum of care. I would ask that you take a look at that and any of the materials that we've put out around how the continuum of care is expected to operate and sort of how it's been formalized through the regulatory process, because it'll help you take what's on this slide and operationalize it to the local level. So you will be developing a board and maybe other work groups and identifying a lead agency. So those are the kinds of things that are laid out in some detail in the regulation.
But with all of this increased responsibility, it's really important to us that the whole process is transparent. And to ensure this, the regulations were written in such a way so that all continuums of care have to have and follow a written and ratified process that's reviewed for selecting the board that meets the requirements of the regulation. These requirements are that they have to have it be representative of the continuum of care and include one homeless or formerly homeless person. There are also 5 or 6 additional proposed requirements that we didn't put into effect for this, but they're in the preamble and we're asking for comment on them, and we ask that you go ahead and read them and let us know to see if we should include those as requirements for the board in the final rule. We also require that the continuum of care develop, follow, and update annually a governance charter. And this sheet should be your operating procedures. It should contain all policies and procedures for how the continuum of care does business, who it's designated to do certain activities, what activities it's keeping for itself, its code of conduct, its recusal process for its board. This is really where everything should be written down so that everyone in the community and everyone here at HUD knows what's going on, because another key change in the COC program rules, we used to incentivize these requirements through the annual competition, but now these are required. And HUD can come out and monitor and see if these are in place, and if they are not, can make findings. So it's really important that everything is written down. And to do this, there is money. The Continuum of Care program provides up to 3% of final pro rata need to be used for COC planning costs. And let me just say, final pro rata need was a very conscious decision by HUD. It's not preliminary pro rata need, and it's not renewal demand, which essentially is annual renewal amount, but with the rental assistance line item added in. And this is really to allow communities that maybe don't have a lot of projects, but have a lot of available money. It's to help them plan to put more projects in their community, or on the other end, it's to help communities manage the projects that they have. And these funds can be used to develop the community-wide process for serving homeless individuals and families, to develop the the housing and service system that we talked about earlier, to participate in the consolidated plan process. Really, these are the activities that are allowed that are around coordination. It can also be used to prepare and submit the application to HUD and everything that goes along with that. It can be used to evaluate the outcomes of projects, and it can be used to monitor recipients and subrecipients within the continuum of care geographic area. And something else that's really important is that the planning dollars are on top of your final pro rata need. We aren't expecting communities to take money out of precious money out of their projects. We will be awarding, this is one of our priorities, and we'll be awarding it on top of your final pro rata need.
I just want to note there what a high priority the HEARTH Act and Secretary Donovan placed on making sure that the infrastructure that's needed to implement HEARTH and to, again, think systemically, transformatively, and at scale was in place. It is always a difficult choice to target funds for something other than serving the next homeless household that is coming in the door. But the Secretary and Congress felt that it was absolutely critical that we have sufficient funding for this continuum of care infrastructure that is so critical to achieving our goals of the federal strategic plan.
That's right, and I think that, you know, when you're talking about systems change, we needed to provide, again, tools through the HEARTH Act implementation to be able to facilitate systems change. And one of those tools that the HEARTH Act provides us is to provide grants for continuum of care planning activities, as Brett described. I do want to make one note that while the regulation does allow us to fund up to 3% for continuum of care planning activities, it is unlikely that we will actually be at that level for the FY2012 competition, just basically due to funding constraints. But we will lay that out very clearly for you all in the NOFA and the registration notice for the 2012 competition that will be out soon. So the next part of our conversation really focuses on what we mean when we say systems change. And, you know, Jonathan and I were actually talking the other day, and we both feel like this is kind of a moment. For those of you who might remember, I do myself, because I worked in the continuum of care in 1995, when we started to implement the continuum of care approach across the country. And that really changed the way that we think about homeless services. It changed the way we manage at the local level, from, you know, having many thousands of individual nonprofits doing whatever it is they are doing locally and applying directly to HUD. It changed that to a coordinated and comprehensive approach that really started to look at data, started to understand what the gaps are in any particular system, and be strategic in thinking at the local and national levels. And I think that all of us sitting at the table today, as well as our colleagues within the department, would agree that we have an opportunity right now with the implementation of the HEARTH Act, as well as with some of the other tools we have within the department and across the federal government, to go a step further. And that means that now is the time to take our strategic thinking to the next level. So let's give you some examples about what systems change might look like at the local level. I would argue that the first thing that a continuum of care would want to ask itself, as Jonathan and Brett both mentioned, is, does my continuum appropriately assess the needs of homeless persons and persons at risk of homelessness for assistance? As we all have mentioned, the federal government, has a plan to prevent and end homelessness with specific goals and housing goals related to those. But that relies on certain assumptions. So what we're talking about now is sort of the big picture of not only how these regulations should work together, but how they intersect with the federal strategic plan and how they intersect with resources that are coming out across the federal government. So that plan, we will not be able to reach the goals of that plan unless you all at the local level can appropriately assess the needs of people who are coming in and place those folks into housing and services that are appropriate for their needs. Both on sort of both sides, whether you, in the past we might have seen a permanent supportive housing program that was sort of a first come, first served, and maybe the person who was showing up for assistance really did not need the intensive services that were provided by that program. But because they were next in line, that seemed to be the best choice for them. So what we're really asking you to do at the local level, again, is to assess your intake process. Look at the tools that you're using. Do you use the vulnerability index? Do you have some other assessment tool that helps you determine across the board whether somebody shows up at Project X or Project Y or calls the 211 system? Do you have a process by which somebody can be assessed at the local level? And you also want to take a look at your system level performance against the measures in Section 427 of the Act, which is how we actually have to score the Continuum of Care competition in each year. After you ask yourself this question, I also think you should ask yourself, do we actually operate on a first come, first served basis? And is that really a strategy that we should have at the local level?
I can just add to that. I think we have, as Ann said, we have a real moment of opportunity here. I think one of the things that is really critical is to speed the adoption of best practices. And all of the things that we're talking about here, somebody's doing really well out there. Some of you are doing really well. Some of you are doing almost all of the things extremely well. If you're struggling with implementing pieces of this, there is help. There's help here. There's help through the U.S. Interagency Council. There's help from the National Alliance to End Homelessness, other intermediaries. But the critical point is that one way or another, it's possible to learn from the lessons of your peers. We know this can be done. And if we do it in enough places with enough force, we really will, I was going to say, will move the needle. We've moved the needle. We've seen the needle move substantially on veterans homelessness and on chronic homelessness, and even on family homelessness during this really significant recession. We know that we can accelerate that, but it's really going to take a willingness and an eagerness to look at what other people are doing and obviously customize it to your own local market and situation. But I think the experience has been over time that what places have in common really dwarfs what they have that is different, and that strategies like Housing First and rapid rehousing are translatable to your local conditions.
And not only are we aligning within the Department of Housing and Urban Development as well as across the federal government, but we're also aligning with our strategic partners like the foundation community. I know that the Gates Foundation has been funding a pilot project in the state of Washington on centralized or coordinated intake, and we'll soon be releasing some at least preliminary findings on what the barriers are and how to overcome those barriers at the local level. So again, we're sort of all aligning to the same message and the same general path to make sure that we can move as quickly as possible to meet the goals of the federal strategic plan. But to sort of get back to asking, if you ask yourself these questions at the local level, I think the question is, how do you know? What do you do once you ask those questions, and how do you know that what you're doing isn't working? And as Brett mentioned, it's imperative that you look at your data. You need to use your data locally to really understand the flow within your system. So how do you know that your intake process isn't working? You want to see how long people are staying, what their outcomes are, whether a lot of folks are returning back to homelessness after they're exited from the system. Those are all indications that either a specific program is is having a problem or the system as a whole is having a problem. And so once you answer those questions at the local level and take a look at your data, we would say that the next step is to revamp the way that you do intake and really look at how you can successfully move people into appropriate housing, and how you can work with your ESG recipients and subrecipients locally to make sure that they're in the same system and working all together as one system.
And if I can just add, all of these questions for systems change and helping you all figure out what your next steps might be kind of assume that the message we have been giving about HMIS and data collection for the past 3 years since the HEARTH Act has passed has been heard, and you've all started implementing that in your local communities and taking the resources that we've offered in the NOFAs to get new HMIS projects or to get money to enhance your HMIS, to use ESG funds to HMIS. If you haven't done that yet, that really should be where you start to ensure that you have the data there, because you want to make sure you're adequately revamping your system. And the only way to do that is to make sure the data is good to begin with.
So another thing that you might want to ask yourselves at the local level is, does my continuum have the right mix of housing and services available to effectively meet the needs of people who are homeless within your continuum of care? And that might mean that you're reviewing your inventory of projects, both ESG and continuum of care. I would also say privately funded projects, locally funded projects as well. So review your total inventory of projects. Take a look at your point in time data and your HMIS data and compare them. Sometimes I'm surprised that local communities haven't actually looked at those documents, the point in time HMIS reports and their inventory, to really see if there's some sort of a mismatch between who they're seeing come in the front door and what kind of resources they have available. Again, you want to take a look at your project level performance in addition to your system level performance. You want to review your intake and assessment process with how those housing placements and decisions are made. Really, the purpose of doing this is because if you revamp your assessment system and you are finally in a good place where you are effectively assessing the needs of people who are coming in and you identify the appropriate resources for them, it doesn't help if those resources aren't actually available in the community for them to access. So
let me just add, I mean, the old phrase, when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, kind of captures what we're trying to do here, which is that the resources in your inventory should not be driving the interventions that homeless individuals and families get. What should be driving those are what they need.
That's right.
To end their homelessness, and so you need to, if what you need to do to sort of stretch the metaphor is to get some screwdrivers and some wrenches, then you need to do that. And that's something that I think this is not easy. We'll talk about the challenging kinds of conversations people have to have, but in almost every area of public policy, things have evolved over time, and without a doubt, your resource mix is going to need to evolve in some way from what it was in, say, the mid-'80s to the mid-'90s to now, the new century.
Absolutely. I think that is a great segue into the next part of our conversation, which is really about the tools that the HEARTH Act gives you to have not just those tough conversations, but to actually make changes within your system so that you can, get rid of some hammers and buy some wrenches and screwdrivers. So one of the tools, obviously it's not the only one, and I don't think it only applies to federally funded programs. The concept could apply more broadly than the Continuum of Care program or the ESG program, but the tool really is reallocation. And if you find that your Continuum of Care has projects that are not effectively addressing the needs of its homeless population, then reallocation of those projects to change them to be something else is an option and a tool that's provided under the HEARTH Act statute and the regulations, and we will implement it through the NOFA, that you can use to address changing needs across, over time and across the board. I think Brett mentioned a little bit earlier about performance measures. Let's talk about that a little bit more here, because again, you're going to have to use your data to understand how your programs are performing. So the first thing that we want to do is have you review your local performance measures really against what the expectations are as set forth in Section 427 of the HEARTH Act. We want to make sure that you're analyzing the coordination between ESG recipients and COC recipients in setting these performance goals. We want you to look at successes and failures using your local data so you can really understand why certain things were working and not working. And all of those are related to outcomes, really looking at not just outputs, not just how many people you're serving, but how many people are having positive outcomes as they move through the system, and how many folks are getting permanent housing at the end of their intervention. But I would also argue that you have to look at drawdown and expenditure data of recipients within the continuum of care, including both ESG and continuum of care grantees. It is painful for us here at the department to recapture as much money as we do in any given year. That means that grantees are sometimes, over the course of a year, consistently giving back money to the federal government, and most times we can't actually reuse that money. That money has to go back to the Treasury. So it's been lost to homeless services in general, and that is something that's painful and unpleasant for all of us. One of the tools that the HEARTH Act provides is, because the continuum of care is now formalized and actually will have a relationship with the department, we can actually provide the continuum of care with the information it needs to do an analysis locally of how their grantees are doing in terms of drawdown and expenditure rates. An example of that is if you have a program within your area that consistently has given back $100,000 a year for the last 5 years, I would argue to you, instead of giving it back to the Treasury, that you should reallocate that $100,000 and build a new program. So really not just looking at performance in terms of outcomes and outputs, but really looking at financial performance as well, because using your money as efficiently as possible is going to be a message that you continue to hear from us. So one of the things that we said, and we've been talking about, and we actually explicitly said at the National Alliance Conference, is these discussions that you're going to start having locally really need to start holding recipients accountable for performance. And I would actually go a step further and say that just because a program isn't hurting anybody, just because they move people through a 2-year program that is extremely service enriched and they have okay outcomes, doesn't mean that they're the most effective and efficient use of your funding locally. So I would say, obviously you want to deal with poor performers first, but beyond that, there's also other types of assessment that you should do at the project level based on what your standards are for performance.
If I can just add to that, I think that I would summarize it to a certain extent, because this was really the major goal of the HEARTH Act, was really to move this to a performance-based system. And I would say that good intentions aren't enough, that basically we have to hold folks accountable for performance. The Act is clear about what those performance measures should look like. And as Ann said, simply not doing damage is not a reason to continue funding a program. We simply don't have the resources to enable that to continue.
That's right. That's not the standard we should be holding ourselves to. So, after conducting your review, if you determine that there are, I would say, poor performers, but even mediocre performers against the standards, we would ask you to do a couple of things. First, make sure the performance measures that you're using locally are really the appropriate ones for that particular group of people. As we mentioned earlier, youth is something that if you have, you should have probably different standards for working with, or performance measures for working with unaccompanied youth versus the chronically homeless versus family populations. So you want to make sure that you are not unfairly penalizing a group that might be actually serving the most hard to serve people, and that's the population we really want folks to focus on.
And I think the other thing that came up at the conference was you also don't want to make your performance measures so easy that everybody within the continuum is going to meet them. So it's important to look at both extremes and to make sure that you're picking a nice medium ground where it's a true measure of performance in your community, not something that nobody can meet and not something that everybody can meet and check the box and move along.
That's a great point. Recognizing that the continuum of care really has the authority now to actually develop and implement corrective action procedures. So you don't have to go straight from, are you, performing in a not great way, to we're going to reallocate you. You could go from, you're not performing, to the best of this program's ability. We're going to develop corrective action measures, and you're going to implement those and then reassess later. And then again, the tool of reallocation is something that is always going to be available through the continuum of care process.
We don't pretend that these are going to be easy conversations, and I just want to re-emphasize something that was mentioned earlier, which is these are not backroom conversations either. These need to be conducted in an open, transparent way that isn't, as I said, necessarily going to be easy, but continuums have been having those conversations. I said anything that we're proposing here has already been done someplace, and we're looking at really accelerating the pace at which people have this conversation about performance. We do want to acknowledge that this is going to be challenging, and the department, and as I mentioned earlier, there are others who stand ready to help.
And to go just a step further, I think, Brett, you mentioned that continuums are going to be required to have policies and procedures and governance charters that not only provide the transparency to their members and to their stakeholders locally, but is actually something that we would monitor against if we were coming out, because it is now a regulatory requirement and not just a NOFA requirement. So systems change at the local level and at the national level, for that matter, also means bringing in and incorporating other types of resources. We all have talked on this panel about ensuring that that other types of resources are brought to the table, because the programs, the homeless assistance programs, cannot on their own end homelessness as we know it. So we would suggest the following discussions at the local level. Do you have a relationship with your public housing authority? If you don't, go to your public housing authority, engage them in the continuum of care process, talk to them about setting aside vouchers or units within public housing. We've held in the last 6 months or so 2 convenings that were jointly developed by the Interagency Council, our Office of Public and Indian Housing, and the Office of Community Planning and Development, to bring together local PHAs, one on the West Coast, one on the East Coast, with their continuum of care counterparts, to really talk about how they can work together at the local level on affordable housing.
If I can just add there, and we continue to follow up on that, I would say, I would add that you should take a look at major project-based multifamily housing operators as well. But I think empirically what we've seen in communities that have really moved the needle is that a real commitment at scale by a PHA is a true game changer. And I think that historically In some places, there have been challenges working with PHAs and NCOCs. It's time to revisit that if you have that history, and be aware that the department is extraordinarily supportive of that partnership.
Great. Another thing we would ask you to start taking a look at is the length of stay in your transitional housing programs. I want to be clear that we're not saying that transitional housing is bad. Transitional housing for some populations is completely appropriate, especially for unaccompanied youth, folks who are recovering from substance abuse. So there are absolutely appropriate uses of transitional housing. But where you have a program design that may be not quite fitting the needs of the folks in your community, can you tweak that program design in your transitional housing program to have a shorter length of stay and serve more people, making it more like a rapid rehousing kind of model, so that you are able to have good outcomes but serve more people in the same amount of time. Another item that we would ask communities to take a look at locally is turnover in your permanent supportive housing projects. Can people who no longer need the high levels of service exit the program to other permanent housing options? You can't make them exit. There's some statutory requirements there, but at some point it might be appropriate to graduate people from a permanent supportive housing program into another subsidized or unsubsidized option that will meet their long-term needs. And can you focus on some of those, potentially using the set-aside vouchers from your public housing authority, let's say, to exit folks from permanent supportive housing into vouchers? That's just an option that folks might want to take a look at. If you're doing homelessness prevention, can you target your homelessness prevention program better? I think that there's a lot of tools out there now, and we'll be releasing some additional evaluation of the HPRP program to really help communities who are actually doing homelessness prevention to do it even better. If you don't know how to do it better, I would consider focusing more on rapid rehousing than homelessness prevention until you have maybe a higher level of sophistication, so that you can be assured that you're actually preventing homelessness with your homeless prevention dollars. And the last one, again, we've talked about at some length. Can you reallocate some of your programs into permanent supportive housing or other types of programs? And the next two slides are a little bit hard to do without having a live audience, so I'm going to do my best. HUD is working on the development and release of what we're calling a tool to provide communities with sort of a visual cue that will help them have these discussions, these very difficult discussions at the local level. And so I'd ask you to take a look at this chart. The chart is reflective of some national numbers. It's not exact, so don't take this chart and think that this is gospel. But let's just say that the green line at the top with the triangles is the status quo, and this is particular to chronic homelessness. If we do nothing after 2011, if we fund no more new chronic homeless programs, serve no more chronic homeless people, you can see that the trajectory in green means that it is likely that the number of chronically homeless people will go up. The line in blue at the bottom is the targets that we originally set for ourselves within the federal strategic plan to get to ending chronic homelessness by 2015 via counting in the 2016 point in time count. The purple line in the middle is the most important for you all to take a look at locally, and that is what policy changes can you make from the status quo to get that line bent down to as close to zero as possible by 2015. So this purple line really helps you identify the kinds of policy changes you can make at the local level that will give you, for lack of a better term, the biggest bang for your buck. So at the national level, maybe it's increasing turnover in permanent supportive housing, or it's getting set-aside vouchers from your local public housing authority. So those are the three lines here really just sort of give you a visual cue. And the tool itself provides two columns. It provides the status quo column, which is exactly what you have in place right now, and then an ability to change the policies that you make locally, and it actually, again, gives you the visual cue on how that bends the line. It's just a tool that will provide, it's not meant to be 100% comprehensive, but it's really a tool to provide you at the local level with a mechanism to have critical conversations about resources. And I'll just go back and show you the change again, making two, policy changes from this chart to this chart really increased the ability to get to zero by 2015. And again, this is something that we'll be releasing. We're actually going to be testing it in 3 communities in the upcoming couple of months, and then we'll be releasing it more widely to help communities have these local discussions. So as a reminder, we've talked a lot about what you can do with the Emergency Solutions Grants programs and what you can do with the Continuum of Care programs. And Brett started out the conversation about those regs to say that they are, again, meant to work together and designed to work together. And so I would just remind you that these are the eligible costs under the ESG program. That includes street outreach and emergency shelter, in addition to rapid rehousing, homelessness prevention, and HMIS. Sort of complementary to that is the Continuum of Care program, where you can't do emergency shelter, but you can do permanent housing. And you can do permanent housing in 2 different ways: permanent supportive housing or rapid rehousing. You can also do transitional housing, HMIS, supportive services only grants, which we'll outline in the NOFA. It will include ways that you can do coordinated or centralized intake and assessment through SSO grants, and homelessness prevention, but only for continuums that are HUD approved, high-performing communities. So to wrap up today's discussion, I just want to remind you that we post all of our resources on the Homelessness Resource Exchange. The link is provided on this slide. And if you are not already on the Continuum of Care listserv, I would ask you to join the Continuum of Care listserv so that you can be sure to be up to date on all of the resources that we're providing as we roll out the new HEARTH Act regulations. This last slide is a reminder that you can submit questions to the help desk, the virtual help desk on the Homelessness Resource Exchange. The link is provided there, but it's also on the front page of the HRE at www.hudhre.info. But we do ask you that because we expect to receive a high volume of questions, please read the regulations and the training materials that we've put out so far before submitting your question to the help desk, because that helps us manage the backlog that I'm sure we will experience. We have a limited staff that can answer those questions, so we want to be as timely as we can. With that, I want to thank Jonathan and Brett for joining me today in this presentation, and I want to thank you, as always, out there for all the incredible work you're doing to prevent and end homelessness for the people who we serve. Thanks.